Hey folks, it's Tas101 Saga, how are we all? Today I'm going to be replacing the bucking in my S&T SMLE. I'll be disassembling the majority of the rifle in case that helps anyone out at all. Right, straight to it. You'll need a screwdriver with at least one flathead, an appropriately sized Phillips head. Pliers for the cylinder head. A set of punches won't go amiss if you intend to remove the barrel extension from the outer barrel, although that's never really necessary. First up, remove the magazine and fire off the action into a safe target to ensure it's clear. Don't ever clear a live firearm this way. This is strictly Airsoft protocol. There are two screws holding in the trigger guard. Loosen one before starting on the other to prevent any chance of damaging threads. Remove the trigger guard and place the screws back in their respective holes to keep everything together. Halfway up the stock you'll find the barrel band and sling swivel. Remove the flathead screw from the swivel. If the band is tight on a new rifle, just pry it apart using a flathead. Lightly screw them back together. Behind the band is a recessed flathead screw. Loosen this until it's flush with the wood. It doesn't need to be fully removed. The nose cap is secured by two screws. The long side screw is not present on my example due to the original 1941 nose cap, which also needs a bit of persuasion to come off. The two main pieces of the stock can now be removed. On the right side of the trigger box, you'll find the spring guide stopper. Use a flathead to nudge it loose and remove it. On the left side there is normally an extra piece you'll have to pull down using a fingernail in order to remove the bolt. I strongly recommend you remove this piece. More on that later. Next, pry off the C-clip from the top of the loading plate. Do not lose it. The loading plate can now be removed. Lift the back of the fake extractor bar from its square-shaped cutout and remove the cylinder. Pull the fake extractor bar to the rear of the receiver and remove it. Turn the rifle upside down again and remove the 4 Phillips screws holding in the trigger box. Now let's take apart the cylinder. This is important for both replacing the spring and basic maintenance. Use an appropriate set of pliers to loosen the cylinder head. Take care not to scratch the nozzle whilst doing this. Once it's loose enough, you can unscrew it by hand and remove the piston, mainspring, spring guide and its washer. Back to the underside of the rifle, you'll need a 3mm Allen key to remove these 2 bolts. Followed by a Phillips head to remove the feed ramp and its screw. This part of the stock is held on by 2 large C-clamps and is under a lot of tension. Flip the back sight forward. Gently wiggle it off, applying even pressure to avoid cracking the wood. Do not put any torque on the outer barrel at the muzzle end while doing this. The C-clamps are secured with Phillips heads. Ensure these are hand tight, but do not overdo it. Remember, it's only wood. On both sides of the chamber, you'll find 2 Phillips head screws. If these are very tight, then loosen them on one side and remove the opposite side screws first. The chamber unit flexes slightly inside the receiver when these screws are loose. This will help prevent damage to the threads while removing or installing screws. Once all the screws are clear, you can separate the barrel assembly from the receiver. I always place them back into the chamber unit to avoid losing them. The external part of the hop slider is secured by a small Phillips screw. Remove the screw that holds the hop chamber and chamber unit together. You can now remove the hop chamber and the inner barrel from the outer barrel assembly. This may be tight on new rifles. Remove the plate and its 2 screws from the chamber. internal part of the hop slider can now be pried out after moving it back slightly. All that's left are the 3 Phillips head screws holding the 2 halves of the hop chamber together. Gently lift off one side, remove the hop arm, along with this piece and its spring. The inner barrel and bucking can now be removed. And that's as far as you need to disassemble the SMLE to give it a good thorough clean, or change springs, hot rubbers, inner barrels, etc. For many guides, mods and other useful information, please join my Facebook group, Airsoft Lee-Enfield Owners. Posts regarding the L96 loading plate and smoothness mods, restaining the stock, real parts compatibility information and much more are available there. Whether you are an S&T or an Aries rifle owner, we are a very passionate community, so be sure to check us out. Link in description. As for my personal rifle, I've upgraded the spring, bucking, inner barrel, loading plate and C-clip, action reliability, and added a stock disc and many other real parts. The butt plate, barrel band, sling swivels, back sight protectors and nose cap have all been replaced with wartime originals. Most required little to no modification to fit, so if you can afford it, it's totally worth doing. At the least, I strongly recommend replacing the spring with an M120 VSR type cut to length, and the loading plate with a modified Airsoft Pro L96 one. Right, so you've done whatever you need to do, let's assemble it. Starting with the left side of the hop chamber, which can be identified by the lack of a slot for the hop slider, place the inner barrel and bucking in place. Return the hop arm in the orientation shown. This particular hop-up system does not contain a separate nub, for it is integrated into the hop arm itself. Make sure this spring is resting on the ledge on the roof of the chamber. Place the right half of the chamber back on. Gently apply downward pressure on the right side of the hop chamber and push the small black plastic piece up against its spring and it will click into place. I recommend using Loctite on these screws to ensure the chamber stays tight around the bucking. Don't forget to look down the barrel and make sure the hop rubber is straight before you assemble it any further. Apply a little pressure on the hop arm so the internal slider can fit into place correctly. It should impinge on the arm like this. Replace the black side plate. Something worth noting, if the hop slider is stiff to move with the side plate installed, this is a good thing. It will reduce the chance of you accidentally adjusting it during use. The inner barrel and hop chamber can now be inserted back into the outer with the hop slider on the right side. With the 2 screw holes correctly aligned, insert the front screw. The receiver is ready to go back onto the outer barrel unit. Insert the first 2 screws until they are flush, but don't tighten them fully. You should be able to replace the opposite screws without resistance, then tighten them all. The external part of the hop slider can now be installed. Observe carefully the position of the C-clamps here. Some folks struggle with this, but it's very simple. Once again, flip the back sight forward. Apply pressure until it's almost flush. You can then wiggle it backwards until the C-clamps click into place over the slots on the chamber unit. Install the feed ramp. Do not over tighten this screw, the ramp is plastic. The cutout shown here must be facing the magazine. Tighten the 2 Allen bolts to secure it. Before reassembling the bolt group, I recommend cleaning the parts and fixing the air seal. I like to Teflon tape my cylinder head threads. Lubricate the cylinder and piston O-ring with medium viscosity silicone oil. Insert the spring guide and its washer, followed by the mainspring and piston. Only tighten the cylinder head until the brass and iron are flush. There is no need to over tighten it. To remove this part of the trigger box, as mentioned earlier, you only need to loosen these 3 screws enough to wiggle the part and its spring out from the top. Of all the rifles I've worked on, this part was the sole cause of all the stoppages. If you are experiencing the bolt becoming stuck about an inch from the chamber or more, this may be the culprit. In my experience, after removing this small part and its spring from the trigger box, the malfunction ceased to exist. Reinstall the trigger box. Quick tip, if you wish to test the rifle after the bolt group is back in, you can just attach the trigger guard and magazine like this. It is not necessary to fully assemble the rifle in order to test fire it. Next, put the fake extractor bar back in the receiver with the lip facing down so it sits on the small guide rail next to the cylinder. Install the cylinder. If you removed this small part from the trigger box, all you'll have to do is hold the trigger down and push the cylinder forward until it passes the sear. The cylinder itself must be in the correct orientation, so the square shaped cutout at the rear near the bolt handle lines up with the corresponding shape on the fake extractor bar. The loading plate is next. Followed by the small C-clip that keeps it in place. Ensure it is flush against the nozzle. If you cannot push the bolt into battery, the loading plate might not be straight. Turn the rifle upside down and check that the loading plate is aligned properly with the slot in the feed ramp. Make sure that the cocking piece is working correctly. If it does not lock back like this, loosen the screws on the trigger box. Hold back the cocking piece and re-tighten them. This should fix the problem. The spring guide stopper will only go in one way. If it doesn't, do not force it. Twist the cylinder slightly. The slot on the underside might not be aligned properly. Before assembling it further, check the action is working as it should by dry firing it in a safe direction. There is a silver collar that slides along the outer barrel that aligns with the screw in the stock. Move it into place and wiggle the stock until it sits right. Replace the top fore end and hand tighten the screw. The fore end will move up and down slightly. This is normal and nothing to worry about. We're now ready to replace the barrel band. The screw will only go in one side from left to right. Put the swivel and the screw in place and tighten. This piece will often fall off. Simply put it back on. Return the nose cap and the two screws. I've built a few of these now with real parts, and in each case the long side screw doesn't want to cooperate with the original nose cap. This doesn't matter, however, as it's perfectly secure with just the one screw, even with an original bayonet attached. Finally, the trigger guard. Put both screws in place first to ensure the threads are properly aligned. Tighten each one and that's it, you're done. As with any airsoft gun, make sure you chrono it after reassembly, especially if you've changed parts. Well, thanks for watching, I hope that was helpful. If you do have any further questions on anything I may have missed in the video, please do post them down below. Check out the description for useful links, and as always, feel free to rate, comment or subscribe for more content. Alright folks, Take care and see you soon.